have 20 minutes which divides us from lunch, and now it's time for your questions, comments. Everybody's so hungry.
Yes. This is a question for Martina. You talked a lot about this question of territoriality and especially language use. And it was striking to me that in the case studies, it seemed as though being able to speak even some German inclined them to feel somewhat more devoted to or somehow more connected to the imperial authorities. And I'm curious if you think that it was specifically because they knew German because of other reasons that they might have felt?
Because they were starting to behave.
Whether they knew a little bit of German was because of some other affinities towards the imperial authorities, or, I mean, I'm just curious about this question of causality, you know, why, if they didn't know any German, if they only spoke Italian, like Mario, your first case study, and that represented something against the Habsburg authorities at all, or?
That's a very interesting point. I think in the case of Giovanni Berlusconi, he knew some German, I think, probably because he was a socialist, and there were somehow, it's very difficult to know, because he did mention why he couldn't understand German, or again, he was a carpenter, so I don't know where if he had some business interest, not dealing both with authorities as well as, but I think probably it's socialist was part of his small knowledge of German, I think it is. In the case of, yeah, right, didn't, yeah, it was really problematic for him actually to understand German, any word of German, and that's why probably his experience with the medical stuff was awful. Yeah.
There's another question. Yes, please.
Martina, about the guy who's the farmer. So does he stay on the farm after he gets married? Because I just wonder if there's a slight fear, an issue, that if he's blind, he can't work the farm. Once he's married, his wife can work the farm. And so therefore, land is secure. You know, even if you're not engaged in conflict, you're still able to do all those other things. You have the children, they can work, like this. And I just wonder, you know, if that is something that maybe in the initial phase, when he's not married, his future is much more precarious. Once he's married, his future is much more secure because his wife can actually, you know, do the important stuff and things like that. And I wonder if that's something that, you know, he maybe talks about.
I didn't, so again, thank you very much for all your suggestions, because I really need to think about. I didn't convey, but it's still true. I don't know exactly when he got married, that's important. Because I have just a document of 1930 where it said that he was married and had 4 children, and the dates when the children were born, so after the war, not the date of the wedding marriage. It can be that still in 1923 he went to Florence to be retrained as a basket maker. Again, yeah, I don't think it was very successful trade anyway. And we don't know if but the basket maker was it when he was in Salzburg. Sorry. It was not successful. We don't know if he refused to get trained as a basket maker because it was something different from what he was used to do. Because he was used to work on a farm. I don't know. There are my assumptions. That's a problem. There are not so much. So what I get is mostly from these memories. There are just 3 pages of memories, as well as from the personal file that I found in Florence. And the letters that he wrote to Aurelio Nicolodi when he went there. So there are just pieces of. That's a very interesting point. So let's hear about the social stuff also related to marriage. And sorry, then obviously marriage, it's important for what you said, but I think it's also important, as we were mentioning it yesterday, because they needed someone who could take care of him. So because he was blind, and blindness is really considered a very, very bad disability because you can't stand and so you can't work. And that's it. It was this conception it was exactly this misconception that Iranian ecology was trying to act because people thought that black people could do anything. So they were very dependent on the others. So, yeah, probably I should try to think more about getting married for different reasons. Yeah.
Yes, Peter.
A question for Marta and Irene. About the second group of women, the teachers that you talked about, you mentioned some interest. I was wondering, because teacher was one of the earlier professions that a woman could pursue in the empire. And you mentioned that for many of the women who became teachers, questions of, you said, I think, emancipation were more important than nationhood, but I would have said maybe questions of profession and professionalism. So I wonder, you mentioned that some of them were one of them I think wrote for a Pan-Slavic publication, but I wondered if any of them had connections, the ones you studied, to other women teachers organizations in other parts of the empire. So not just in a nationalist sense, the empire, but more in a professional sense.
I suppose for this literal environment, because I studied especially Marta Bishop and Augusta Schantel in Vinizia. So the Marta Bishop is, I think, one of the first very international profiled teacher. She started in Vinizia, and I think that she used his job for entrance in the national level, because also in her autobiography, in her memoir, the big part of her explanations is connected with her national event. The importance of Marta Bishop is that it's really the center of a very big network. In them, she has relationships not only for other teachers, intellectuals, because I use also this definition. I think that the Marta Bishop and other teachers engaged in the national movement are the first generation of the intellectuals, female intellectuals. And so this Marta network, this network, it has a very strong relationships with all Slovene intellectuals in this period. Ashkerts, especially liberal-oriented. So this professional life, she also suffered in the school because, okay, he's very national-oriented, but the teaching in this rural school, as in Prosek, this time, or Slitivan, okay, is absolutely terrible because the students are not, or the scholars are not interested in academics. Yes, also Irena.
Just add that maybe those teachers are too specific because they are all concentrated around the circle of Slovenka. This was the first women's journal, and yes, part of this program was national cause, but the other part of the program was emancipation. And especially Danica, she basically read daily documenting the Frauen or sent to her. She's basically also the one problem, I think, now I found just her who wrote and to sign some pacifist claim in Slovenian territory, not the others. So those teachers gathered around Slovenka are a little bit special. But you could also found these teachers in the General Slovene Association, And this Slovenian, General Slovene Association was basically the only one, beside the Polish one, which is also the member of the Österreichische Bundesverein. They were engaged in this emancipation struggle, but not so much connected with the professional teachers circle, because they both quit the job after they married. So it was not long for them to be engaged in this circle.
We have more questions, but first, and then Eugene will.
Okay, well, regarding to the first presentation, I would, talking about my dissemination, I would rather say her drama after she became a mother and limited to her domestic skills, coming more from the fact that she was now limited to home, not that she was not carrying this national torch, because her becoming a mother for like future Slovene sons and daughters was also like very important for them, and also in Slovenka they write about this, the role of mother for a nation is crucial. Because I understood you differently.
So I think that we have a nice source for this problem. We have their memories. We have also others articles. We have also the memories of her son. And I think that this question of the motherhood was really for a very dramatic for her, because if we read her novels, in the novels he wrote about the intellectuals, he wrote about the women and romantic love. And I think that here is divided between, I don't know if Irena agreed with me, is really divided with this very traditional role of women and with this emancipated role of women.
She basically had a different image of the marriage. So the ideal and reality are in conflict with her, but I think she really wrote about her memoirs, her public engagement are all gone, how she wants to be in the public, but however the children are taking too much time.
Yes, your whole.
Okay, so I have questions to everyone, but I'll save most of them for lunch. Just restrict myself to one question from Marco. And Marco, I really enjoyed your paper and your work in this campaign. And I wondered, when you were looking at this topic, did you find anything about radical South nationalist groups and any kind of interaction between these, with these sort of Italian fascists? Because when I look at these South groups, it seems to be very striking how they're mirroring these violent practices and behaviors, because they never said openly, or you, for example, would never say they're copying fascists because they're violently opposed to them. So I just wondered if you'd seen any, what it looks like on the other side of the Asian axis, so to speak.
Yeah, thank you very much. I found some evidence from the newspapers. I mean, they were talking about, Argentine fascists were talking about the possibility from the very beginning of, in a sense, exporting their model. And they were, of course, particularly interested in exporting the model within the Croatian nationalist movement. Because I suppose that, normally fascist revisionism tends to be dated back to the 30s, but it was very much from the beginning of the movement, from 1919 onwards. So, of course, the idea of overthrowing the Yugoslav state here in the making through a model which might be exported and much converted Croatian nationalist movement through the fascist methods was present in the discussion, but I couldn't find so far evidence about personal contact or direct links between the movements. Of course, it's a huge work because I suppose it's something which is mostly neglected in the past. Just seen through the lens of the national conflicts, so just embracing the possibility of finding connections. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We have 4 minutes and 2 questions, or two people. So you have 1 minute for each question, then you have 1 minute for that. So first Oak and then Ivan.
Okay, now I have just a quick question.
No, you're after Oak.
Thank you for it. Okay, thank you. No, the question was, you talked about adding Zara, your considerations. Because I know how fascists actually work in that town. The way that was majorly Italian, you still had the countryside, which I suppose was not Italian speaking. So it would be somehow useful to connect in the case of Upper Adriatic with Zara fascism and see what you think about it.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, of course. I decided just to focus on the Eastern case, but of course it might be much more complicated if you broaden the focus and you include Zara, Split, and of course if you include Este and Gorizia, of course, but these are very different cases, and the real problem is how to combine all these cases, because the risk is to just replicate the self-representations. Of course, the interest of the fascist groups was to create the idea that the Upper Adriatic borderland was a problem as such, but you have very different situations at the local level. And so, first I think that we should look at the local level and then to escalate the focus and try to have a broader image.
Also, I think that we have very different local heritage. Heritage of nationalism is very different
Sure.
than in Trieste or
In Zara.
or in
Sure, yeah, and
No, kind of. It's also for Mark. You mentioned South Form fascism. I imagine many of them are doing it for pragmatic reasons. You mentioned global motives. Have you found any at all who were actually ideologically invested in the whole business of fascism?
Yeah, it's very much complicated issue. I think that it's very hard to separate practical dimension and ideological dimension when you are mobilized, you are included in a movement such as the fascist movement. You can pretend, you can claim, of course, to do it just for practical reasons, but this involves such a huge set of arguments directly connected with the situation on the ground and the general situation, political situation. It's, of course, you can claim that these spheres are separate, but I don't think that this really works with radical movements in general. And so I think that different motivations overlap, interact with each other, and it's very different to focus on the primacy of one of the reasons. But above all, I think that when the fascists spoke about Slavic fascists, Croatian, Slovenian fascists spoke about persons who had not yet really decided their national identifications. So this was a kind of projection of the fascist, it was their identity seen through the fascist lens. Because of course, these people talk a kind of mixed language with dialects, and they were able to speak Croatia and Slovenia as well. But the idea that they could just be identified as Slavic people, or Croatian or Slovenian, was the fascist representation of these people. And what is interesting in a sense is that they went on leveling this way, even if they were involved in the fascist movement. But I think that it's a very, the approach based on national difference can provide a useful starting point for understanding why these people had their nationalization and the outcome much more of the starting point of the process. For instance, fascism was the agent of nationalization of this person because it imposed them, in the sense, to choose a form of identification. But, thanks.
Okay. We run out of time, as always. So, thank you very much for this panel. Thank you very much for these questions. And we will be back at 4:44. Okay?